Hello, everyone. If you're of a certain age, a Gen X age in particular, like myself, Pete, and Roger, video games have been a staple of your childhood, your formal adolescence years, probably even into your college years and into adulthood. We've grown up with gaming, and games have evolved well beyond Atari, Coleco, Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation, and Xbox. In a previous life, I worked for an advertising agency in Manhattan called McCann Erickson, and we actually launched the Xbox. I was one of probably a dozen people that knew what Xbox was in around 2001, and no one heard of it. It was an upstart with Peyton Manning as the face of the football franchise and a little game called Halo, which I kind of described at the time as Metroid on steroids, but even cooler than that. One thing we did here growing up is that video games will never get you anywhere. You can't make a living playing video games. It's not productive. Well, we're here today with a gentleman called Will Hershey, who is at the forefront of investing and thinking about video games in a very different way than we did when we grew up. So sit back, buckle in your seatbelt, and grab your paddle. It's $5 Buzz.
All right, guys, welcome to this edition of $5 Buzz. Per usual, we've got Roger Michael Mayer coming to us from the world-famous Brewery Artist Loft in downtown Los Angeles. Roger, how are you?
Well, we're actually on the east side over here, not downtown, just south of Dodger Stadium, east of Chinatown, I like to call it. It's called Lincoln Heights, actually, but
okay,
close
cool.
enough. We're close enough to downtown. Doing
Excellent,
great.
man. Excellent. Roger, are you a gamer? Would you call yourself a gamer?
Well, the kids all do say I'm always sitting around playing games, but I play a lot of Pogo. You ever heard of Pogo.com? Get on there and play the spades game. Sometimes I just sit around, but I like my occasional Call of Duty. Go ahead.
Awesome. And then, of course, also, as you just heard his excellent cold open there, we have our man in Connecticut, George Cursar. How are you?
I'm doing well, Pete. Thanks.
George, are you at the
for asking.
clamshell right now?
I'm not at the clamshell yet. I could be there, but as of yet, it's Tuesday, but it's lunchtime, so you never know what's going to happen.
George, are you a gamer yourself?
I'm not a gamer, really. As I mentioned in the cold open, I was a pretty big Nintendo guy back, as most people my age are. I'm 44, so I think I was right in the sweet spot of 1987. I think regular Nintendo NES launched. So I'm not a gamer. However, my two daughters, as you know, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they've started to play this game called Roblox. If you haven't been familiar with it or you don't have kids, I really believe it's the way that adolescents and teenagers are going to communicate with each other, the same way that Roger had his beeper, I had my coin operated phone, and Pete, you were using the landline. You can talk to one person at a time, but now it's very collaborative. It's very imaginative. And again, contemporary society will say too much screen time is a bad thing. I'm kind of seeing it. Well, I agree with that to a certain extent, and I think there's some validity to it. Just seeing the way that these young girls and boys collaborate with each other and are able to communicate with each other, it's really intriguing. And I know Roblox went public on the stock exchange not too long ago, and I think they're a really great company. But before I don't want to get too long-winded, I want to,
Roger or George, that all beats the old piece of paper with all your friends' numbers you had in your pocket. All of us had growing up. I myself was into Tetris. That's about the extent of it. Of my gaming experience, we had a video store down the street that my dad would let me rent a NES console, play maybe Tetris or RBI Baseball or Super Mario Brothers, but that was about it.
That was always fun to go up there and see what games were available, right?
Totally. But however minimal your experience with gaming might be, you'd have to live under a rock if you don't recognize the impact the multi-billion-dollar gaming industry has had on society. Which brings us to our special guest today, Will Hershey. Welcome, Will. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks
in the
for
heat
being
here
on.
in New York.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. I've heard as of late it's been a little rough out there, so hang in there in the air conditioning. George, why don't you tell the fine people a little bit about Will?
Yeah, Will, it'd be great if we could just kind of take it back to your formative years, where you grew up and how you became really interested in gaming, technology, investing. What was it like before you enrolled in Vanderbilt?
Sure. So we're going way back here. And by the way, talking about how we used to communicate, I think I was like a Nokia. The brick phone, I think, was where when I got started, and we would, that was Snake. If
Snake
you
was
remember
on
Snake,
that. I do remember Snake,
and that was pre-Brick Breaker, which was the BlackBerry that brought that, and those were like some of the most addicting games ever. So I actually grew up here in New York City, which a lot of people, when they hear that, like, they're surprised to learn that, and it's easier to talk about the investing side, and I can go into gaming, but both my parents actually worked on Wall Street. So my dad worked at Merrill Lynch. My mom worked at Lehman Brothers, two firms that no longer exist today.
right?
And really, kind of from that perspective, grew up with CNBC on the TV, very much so from day one, kind of interested in investing, interested in the markets.
Jimmy Cramer in the background.
Exactly.
Pounding the table.
And who was it? What was his name? Haynes?
Santelli? Oh, yeah. Mark Haynes. Yeah.
Mark Haynes. That was he used to be on as well.
Rest in peace.
Yes, indeed. So that kind of was formative in terms of finance and investing background. And I actually was more, well, I was an athlete growing up, played football, lacrosse, but very much so throughout, the entire time growing up, was a gamer myself. I wasn't, you talked in your intro about how, or you alluded to the fact that, now people are making millions of dollars playing video games. I wasn't like on track to do that. I was a casual gamer, but gaming was just, and I think maybe, kind of my generation, I was born 1989, probably, grew up with, the Xbox that you worked on. And it was gaming had started to kind of change and become a much more kind of immersive social experience. And that's very different from kind of where it used to be. So that was kind of my background in gaming. I ended up going to Vanderbilt to study economics. This is 2007. So it was kind of interesting being a New Yorker going down to the South for school.
Can you tell the people a little bit, if you don't mind, what going to college in Nashville, Tennessee is
like? Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great fucking town. Oh my god.
I didn't realize we can curse on here.
Yeah.
All right, we're just doing it. No, it's an awesome town. I'm still not a country music fan, if I'm being perfectly honest. Or like I can tolerate it, but it's not like my go-to. So
Sure.
That took a little getting used to, but it was a very different experience that I think you're seeing now. It was very much so driven by Greek life, kind of old school Southern from that perspective. I don't know. It was fun to kind of leave New York, which I'm now back in New York for 4 years to do that. No complaints on that experience for sure.
And I guess you guys just missed the Jay Cutler era, right?
Jay Cutler. Oh no, we had 1 year. Yes, we did miss Jay Cutler. Sorry,
yeah,
we missed Jay Cutler.
He's had an interesting career, I think, more as a meme, and my wife watches some show that he's on that I can't recall the name of it, but he was a really good football player. I think he just never really lived up to his potential for one reason or another. But that was probably the biggest player that Vanderbilt had, for, at least that I can remember.
No, for sure. He was definitely the biggest name. We had a couple guys go to the NBA, but no one too huge. And now the baseball team is what's grabbing all the headlines. First and third pick, what was it? Something like that in the MLB draft from Vandy.
No kidding. That's great. So you graduate Vanderbilt, you're studying economics, like you said. So you kind of probably always had in the back of your head, or your career path was, I'm going to go back to New York and get involved in finance. Is that how, did you just kind of take the traditional path of like, I'm going to graduate, do an internship and just, leverage my network and, maybe there was a track for Vanderbilt folks to get placed up in some of the firms in New York?
I don't know if I'd say I took the traditional path, and like, well, my major was economics, my minor was beer pong, for sure.
Yeah.
And kind of like knew I wanted to do something within finance. I told you the background, my parents both worked in the industry, but wasn't really sure. I actually ended up interning for a boutique shop here in New York called Yorkville Capital that was focused on energy investing.
Right.
Even more specifically, it was focused on energy infrastructure, which is like pipelines and gathering and processing assets, not the sexiest stuff, not the sexiest stuff around, but it was actually kind of hot back in 2011, 12, 13. So I ended up getting an internship there, went to work there after school. And believe it or not, we actually launched exchange traded funds, ETFs, at that small boutique firm, which kind of introduced me to that structure, which is what I'm doing now today. I don't mean to skip around much, but
right.
Got to understand the ETF model, which for those who aren't familiar that are listening, is very similar to kind of a mutual fund if you're investing in those in your 401k or otherwise, but it's actually listed on an exchange. And it's a sector that's typically thought of as dominated by iShares and Vanguard and these massive firms. We were a small little firm, but we did it. And I got to really kind of, number one, learn about how that structure is beneficial to investors. And we can talk about that if we'd like, but more than that, kind of understand as a small team. And I was a junior guy, but I was sitting in on all these meetings. How do you almost like, even not how do you do an ETF? How do you like run a business? Like, how do you, like, what are the different kind of moving parts? But that was kind of the background that led me to where I am today in the firm that I've started. Just to fill in the gaps there, we launched 2 funds focused on energy. We raised $400 million in assets in those funds. In those 2, we actually sold them to a larger ETF company. Then I stuck around with the partners at that firm, and we focused on separately managed accounts. And we actually got seeded for a long-short hedge fund focused on energy. So I was in energy for a long time, which was a pretty good learning experience, but glad to not be there right now. And so I'm kind of breezing through this, but that fund ended up shutting down. And I kind of reconnected with a friend of mine I'd grown up with, my now co-founder, back when crypto was having its last cycle. So now we're going through the most recent cycle, and we're kind of on the downturn here, but 2017, 2018 was the last crypto cycle. And I kind of reconnected with my friend, and we came to the similar conclusion that, there's kind of a change in the way that people, but more specifically younger people, are approaching investing. They're having conversations on Discord and on Reddit and on Twitter, and like investing in finance historically, I mean, I guess you had Yahoo message boards, right? But it wasn't the same kind of social type viral type environment that we saw with crypto.
It's funny, those message boards are still out there and people are still taking them seriously, I think, or some people do.
Well, that's what I like to tell people. I'm like, look, markets, like, people don't change, right? Like right now it's Reddit and it's Robinhood. But for me, when I first got started, it was Yahoo message boards and it was Scottrade. But it's right. And people like to say that, I mean, it's the same thing in a different flavor. But we kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask, so it makes sense. You had the ETF background, and sound like the fund was winding down, or the firm was winding down. So you had this idea at the time. Was it you were gonna, when you launched, were you focused on? Maybe I'll let you tell it, but did you guys meet a lot of resistance and skepticism when you said, "Hey, we're going to be hyper focused on the emergence and the growth of gaming"?
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%, right? So just taking that where we left off. So we said, this is changing the way that, kind of younger people are interacting with markets. So we said, let's leverage my experience in ETFs and create a new ETF company that, number one, creates products that younger people are passionate about and focuses, like you said, George, on these emerging themes. Mm-hmm. First one we ended up focusing on was gaming and esports. And then number two, let's primarily try and take a different approach to growing and marketing and distribution by really kind of trying to focus on social and one-to-many communications and getting in front of his, being on the internet, really, in the broadest sense. And when we started to do it, just for context, to launch one of these ETFs on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, it's expensive. It costs, a couple $100,000 just to have a fund out there. So
a lot of paperwork with the lawyers and a lot of compliance, and the SEC the regulators are all over you. I'm sure it's like a big part of your day to day or week to week dealing with the regulators and FINRA and SEC. Is that true?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the biggest. That's one of the biggest things we deal with, is playing within the rules that you kind of articulated there. But so we said, like, I had left my hedge fund role. My now co-founder was an investment manager out in the West Coast, out in the Bay Area, and we had to raise money to launch this ETF company. Right, we didn't have the capital to put into that.
Right, and that's when I first met you, because a quick aside, a friend of mine, his name is Mark Salino. He started a fantasy sports platform that he's raising some money for, and he's actually making some traction working with Major League Baseball. But I met you at a conference in Midtown Manhattan, and I think that's when we first connected, because at the time I was working for RBC, and I think we were able to make an introduction for you to, at least, I don't know if you were raising capital or what. Maybe you can tell us what was going on at that point.
Yeah, I think we had the ETF out there for our first ETF, but we definitely faced resistance trying to raise. Well, two primary reasons. One, we were getting into an industry that I mentioned earlier was dominated by these massive asset managers, right? Trillions of dollars, and people kind of look at you and say, you're kind of crazy to try and go up into a market like that and think you can compete. Number one, and number two was exactly what you touched on, George, which is a video game and esports fund, which was our first fund that we had planned to launch, and we did end up launching it in June 2019 with the ticker symbol NERD. We always try and throw like fun, awesome tickers on there.
I love
that. So we definitely had. I mean, it was hard. I mean, for anyone listening, like, it's just hard. No matter what business you're in, it's hard to raise money for a startup, right?
It's hard to get anyone to respond to your email, right?
I mean, if I can just jump in, how do you raise money for a startup? Where do you go, and on what strength? I mean, what's your pitch essentially? I mean, I'm certainly out of my depth. I'm fascinated by this topic, but how do you go about raising $400 million, as you had mentioned earlier?
So that was the 400 million, I guess, was in this exchange traded fund wrapper, right? So with these exchange traded funds, they're actually listed, so anyone can go out and buy them. So that becomes like the distribution mechanism. And for context, at my new firm, Round Hill, that we started, and we launched this video game ETF in 2019. We've since launched a fund on streaming, on sports betting, on these emerging themes. On the metaverse, we actually launched one. We have about 700 million that we've raised since in about 2 years. But for startup,
what were your first meetings like? Were you going up, knocking on the doors of major institutions, or is this more of like?
Oh yeah.
Like, I think Pete, that's what you're saying, is like when you're first walking out the door, you're making some phone calls. Who are you talking to, and what are those conversations like?
Well, first of all, I wish I had the right answer on how to do it, but it took us a while, right? Because it's kind of like, and we were raising a couple $1 million so the hundreds of millions is for the actual product we have, but this is like to operate the business, to even launch those products.
Okay.
So in that case, we were raising, $2 million was kind of our ask. And it was really kind of tricky because, typically you'd want to go to venture capital firms that are in the business of, they place 100 of these bets. One of them ends up being the next, pick your, Uber of X or whatever you want to call it. And that makes their fund, right? X percent of them that are going to be zeros. A couple of them, they'll return, 1 or 2 times their money. And then a couple just skyrocket. The tricky part for us was our business model, at least on paper back then, didn't really fit our business was launching these innovative funds, but it didn't really have the quote unquote like sexy upside of the, launching Uber, right? It wasn't going to be at least back then, the thought was it wasn't going to become 100, whatever, pick some crazy number, So that was the tricky part there. We spoke with some angel investing groups. Those are typically firms that even do earlier on than venture, but oftentimes they'll want you to have a product in the market. So we ended up raising a small round from friends and family. Very fortunate that we had the ability to even do that. So that was kind of huge. But then after that, we actually, and believe it or not, it was a cold LinkedIn message initially that kicked off the conversation. We ended up finding a German venture capital firm called Bitcraft that's focused not on finance, but focused on gaming and esports. And we pitched them like, look, we're going to do this first one in gaming. We're going to replicate that model and do it again and again in these different verticals. And they, long story short, bunch of meetings. I flew out to LA, met in a WeWork there, and kind of the rest was history. And then we had enough capital to launch the business, and now we're at a point where we don't need to raise anymore. Now it's just about executing.
So when you're developing this ETF, are you concerned that other people might be doing the same, or were you quite confident that you had a unique idea here, and that it seems to me it's a great idea, and if but are you worried that there's competition in that same kind of vein when you're launching?
100%. And that's one of the trickiest parts of the business I'm in, is there's no, I can't trademark or copyright a certain sector, right? I can't say no one else can launch a video game fund now because I've launched one. That's not only a thing that crosses our mind when we're working on new funds, but it's also like once you're out there, that's a real risk. But that's where it kind of helps.
ETF, so an ETF is essentially like an index, right? Is that a fair way to put it? Like the Brazilian index. It's a bunch of different companies in Brazil that is put together that you would have. Is it kind of a similar idea?
Exactly. So I'll give you a little bit more on the nerd ETF really quick. Inside of that, so if you go and buy nerd on Robinhood or TD Ameritrade, you're actually getting exposure to, let's call it 30 odd companies involved in gaming and esports. Some of them make the games, some of them run streaming platforms, some of them make the keyboards and the mice and the headsets, and all those together. The thought is, and they're also global companies, right? Some might be from Hong Kong or Taiwan or Korea. The thought is, rather than making a bet on one game or one company, you kind of say, look, I don't know who's going to win here. You give the money to us. We have an index that tracks all this stuff, and that's kind of the way you do it.
Gotcha. It's interesting. Is it accessible for common folk, or is it already very expensive, this ETF?
No, I mean it's trading at less than $30 a share. So
wow,
and now
that's amazing.
So you could go on Robinhood and buy one share if you wanted. Or whatever app it might be that you use.
Fantastic.
A question, sorry, Pete. Just if as it pertains to the launch of Nerd, can you just give the listeners some context? Your conviction, I believe, when I saw your deck back in my RVC days, was the magnitude, the depth of seriousness that e-gaming is enjoying in Asian markets. I think it's Korea, maybe China. I'll let you tell it once again, but can you just give most of our audience is in the US. We do have some international folks, believe it or not, which we're happy to have. Everybody's welcome here. But the seriousness that e-gaming is taking in Asia, can you explain that? And what are you seeing, and how do you see that growing going forward?
Yeah, for sure. And I think when I look at video games and esports more broadly, to me, it's already a massive market. Gaming is, right? Gaming is, people don't even realize this. Gaming is probably, depending on where you look, the biggest form of entertainment globally. We're talking about almost 200 billion in revenues, and growing 10% per year. So it's a massive market.
A lot of competing entertainment forms are shrinking. Is that right? Isn't that right?
Totally. I mean, you look at linear TV shrinking, music has actually had a resurgence, and streaming has kind of brought it back to life a little bit, but that's been on decline for decades in terms of revenues. Box office, I mean, that's not a surprise to anyone that's in trouble, AMC shareholders aside. But no, it's taking share, and it's also, it's a generation. We talked about this at the very beginning, but it's a generational change that's taking place across the globe. And to give you some numbers, so part of it is just the growth of gaming, but this other part is this concept of people watching people play games, which I think is like, it's difficult for some people to comprehend, but it's massive. And you're talking about 400 million people globally that are regular viewers of gaming and game streaming and esports. As you mentioned, George, a lot of that historically has taken place in Korea, where StarCraft 2 was like, if you went pro in StarCraft 2, that was being like the quarterback on on XYZ NFL team. In China, League of Legends is like, if you buy the numbers, they're getting 100 million people to tune in for the finals. So it's kind of this. It's definitely started to take root in those parts of the world, and you're now seeing it move over into the U.S., where we're now starting to hear stories of whether it's Ninja, who's probably the most famous pro gamer from Fortnite. You're having, first of all, competitive teams that are fielding teams across different games. You're having these individuals who are becoming stars in their own right compared to traditional athletes. And when you look at the experience of gaming has changed so much from the types of games you were talking about right in the very beginning, where it's not just I buy the cartridge for $50 or whatever it is, play the game through. It's now a form of entertainment that keeps on living and breathing and changing and evolving, and it's what young people want to do, quite honestly.
Right. And I'm seeing it real time with my daughters, because they both like to go on YouTube and follow people that are either playing games or doing something. So yeah, I could see celebrity and fame being starting out from, it's kind of interesting that it's kind of decentralized. You don't have to have a financial backer. You don't have to come from a certain pedigree. If you're good enough, I guess you'll get a following, which is kind of refreshing, that everybody has an opportunity. The barrier to entry is pretty low. Roger, I don't know if you wanted to jump in with any questions.
I was gonna say, that's just great that we're going to be, pumping out generations and generations of couch potatoes.
But Roger, there is a sort of romantic, there were arcade kids that were fighting for the top score, and your only prize was the top score. Now you get the top score, you might get paid. I mean, that's totally different.
That's true. And I spent plenty of quarters in those back in the day when I was a kid. There's no doubt about it. But I love video games. I don't have a problem with it. It's just that I just like the kids that get out and do a little something else besides just play video games all day. That's all. That's just my age. That's just being 50.
I agree with you, man. And, as a parent, not to turn this into a parenting show, but I do see to it that, I'm an old sentimentalist for the analog world, being outside and playing music and, having contact with nature and other humans is super important. And I think that you can find a balance. But I do think, Roger, I think you could probably agree with this from the standpoint of an artist and an entertainer, is that it is kind of cool that there are opportunities for maybe these kids in Korea couldn't ever get a chance to do anything else. Now there's a new industry, there's a new sector for them to, do something positive and maybe have some opportunity. And, it's a new venue for entertainment that the possibilities are pretty exponential, I guess.
I will say that Korea, though, has a very, very, very good film industry. So they've already got they're not losing any money in the box office like we are over here. It's only because of the pandemic that the box office has really gone down. But of course, a movie makes $1 billion or $2 billion in America. That's nothing compared to what an individual video game will make, right? I mean, how much is a brand new Call of Duty? How much money is that going to make?
Massive. Yeah.
So was it like $5 billion or something like that? More?
Wow.
Yeah. So it's but you're right. Korea is a pretty good example, but I do know, a lot of people from Korea. Korea's a pretty but South Korea, I mean,
Right.
Korea we're talking about.
Yeah.
They have a very extensive and revered culture that's in tune to the arts.
K-pop, right?
Sure.
Hey, Will, you mentioned AMC earlier in passing, but I did want to actually touch on it because I've got a few friends that they're kind of buying into this whole squeeze talk and everything. And, I myself bought a little bit when it was fairly cheap. It goes up and down as expected. And just personally, that the pandemic was kind of coming to an end. We don't really know what's happening right now in California because they've recently put the mask mandate up. But I mean,
Again.
to me, yeah, again, but to me, it feels like it's not a bad bet because people will go back to the theaters. But is it going to hit these astronomical numbers? I just don't see how. I mean, can you provide any information or color from your perspective about what's happening with these Reddit boards? And is the common person getting a shot at the stock market like it's traditionally not been the case, it seems, if you follow me?
Yeah, there's a can of worms. Like we could have a whole podcast talking about this, I think, probably.
Give us the highlights.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to unpack. So I think it's really interesting, right? Because this all kind of started with GameStop, was kind of the first instance of this kind of narrative playing out, where you had tons of hedge funds in that case that were short the stock, probably more than should have been. And the trade was picked up by, Roaring Kitty, deep fucking value. He figured it out. And that was awesome, right? But what I do think at the very highest level has changed. Like, I've been someone who's been on Wall Street Bets, right? The message board that all took place before this had happened. And the way that the financial media kind of made the story about, look, the retail investor is now empowered, and this is all about giving it to the man. And no, this was just about one dude who figured out a good trade and put it on. And we're making it to be more of, we're making it to feel like it's more structural, that the market's changed, that the power is now in the retail investor. Like institutional investors were the ones who made a ton of money on that trade and on AMC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I get kind of frustrated with it, because, you had back with GameStop, you had all these, billionaires on TV saying, this is great, give it to the man. It's like, it's kind of bullshit, if you ask me. Like, this is one dude who found a great trade. Now, though, like, the fact that it's been, and George, you could probably talk to this too from like your experience in the market, but the fact that it's been 5 months or so since this first started, like, I've studied the markets enough to know that, well, to think or believe that normally this shit doesn't last that long, right? Like something has fundamentally changed, and like any rational actor would tell you that GameStop is not worth like $20 billion when people download their games now. Like, what are they going to do? Like, what are they going to possibly do?
Do they even have GameStops anymore?
Yeah, they do. There's one in Stamford, Connecticut, right?
What's their trade? Don't they just buy and sell old games? That's all I ever thought that place was.
It's probably not much different than
They still have one across from New Beverly down there, Pete.
Wow, crazy.
It's one of those stores amongst many stores that I can't for the life of me understand that are still in existence, whether
in a brick and mortar capacity,
right?
Anyway.
Whether it's a Party City or whether it's a Bed Bath and Beyond, the delivery services have really made these guys obsolete, and to continue to pay, at the basic level, rent for retail space and taxes and liabilities and trying to staff it with employees, it's just not. Forget about, making a profit. What about just keeping the lights on? Paying the electric bill has got to be a challenge.
But there seems to be a difference between the GameStop situation and this AMC situation, because AMC actually has a viable product that I think people are going to go to the theaters in droves after this. Yes, you can have a nice viewing experience in your home. And maybe before the pandemic, it was going that way, that their home theaters were more desirable because they could stop a movie or whatever, but people still want to sit in a theater. And I think people want to go out and have the social experience of going to a theater more now than in a long time. So I don't think it's a bad bet. In some respects, it's not going to hit these crazy numbers, but it's going to go up. I do believe it's going to go up personally.
So the thing,
real quick, Black Widow was a pretty good call to arms though for the movie theaters, because they offered a time and day and date on the same time public for access to the public on Disney Plus for additional $29.99. That bit heavily into the theater markets, and the the distributor makes more money by putting it online than they do by giving it to a movie theater.
Well, people are actually paying $29.99 to see Black Widow. That blows my mind.
I mean, if you think about it, Pete, it's not that much different than you're paying to go to the theater. This initial sticker shock.
Well, no, 5 people are going to watch that movie for that amount.
Yeah, if you have a family and you think about how many people you have to,
and you also share your
it's a great point
password with a lot of people,
right?
So it's exponentially goes down as far as, but Disney gets to keep all that revenue. They almost get to keep 98% as opposed to 65 or 70%.
So by that logic, AMC and Regal Cinemas and all these big chains could be squeezed right out, unless they have some
already on the verge of that now.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, for context, AMC, before all this craziness and they were able to raise money because the stock price got higher, they were a real risk to straight up go bankrupt. And I think when you look at AMC, GameStop, I appreciate what you're saying. Maybe people do go back to the theaters, but these stocks are not trading based off of any semblance of real value. They're trading off of, a cheat code, quote unquote, that was found in the market, which is a combination of these highly shorted stocks. And on top of that, and I don't mean to get too much in the weeds here, but like what's effectively like weaponized option buying, where people buy the calls and there's a mechanism on the back end for the market makers that hedge them, and they're forced to buy. And kind of with GameStop, I don't know how high that price would have gone if Robinhood wasn't forced to stop trading. Like once things get disconnected from reality, to your point, it's like, I don't know, more buyers, not more buyers and sellers. There's always one-to-one, but you know what I mean? Like this is a market structural issue, not a what are these companies worth issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Guys, if it's okay, I think we're going to take, we're at the 35-minute mark. Why don't we take a little break, and then we'll just come back and hit a couple of other, I'd like to talk about the metaverse a little bit, and maybe about sports gambling, and Roger and Pete, whatever you guys have.
Hey, we have a quick favor to ask. We want to get the word out, and the way to help is for you to subscribe to us on either Apple or Spotify. And it would be really huge if you give us a rating and a review. Much love. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're back again here on the $5 Buzz, talking to Mr. Will Hershey here in Manhattan, talking about all things finance, some things gaming. I just wanted to say that as far as Wall Street goes, I used to occupy a place down there. Never mind. Bad joke. Anyway, back over to you, George.
That was good. It took me a second to get that, but let's keep people thinking on their toes. Will, another ETF that's offered through your firm Roundhill is based on sports gambling. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts, similar to we're talking about the movie theaters erosion of revenue? I kind of think that sports is kind of at a reckoning point. I'll take the NFL and, English Premier League and the big European leagues out of it, because I know they'll be successful no matter what, I think. But some of the other, let's take Major League Baseball as an example.
Take NFL. No, take NFL. NFL
okay.
Be the almighty giant. It was never going to go anywhere.
Right.
And that's not the case anymore. But go ahead.
I'm thinking about Major League Baseball. We'll use a local situation. The New York Yankees, they have 162 games, 80 of which are played in a relatively new stadium. that I'm sure there's some debt service on. They built these parking lots and they sold bonds, which they owe the investors coupons. And now people the attendance was down. Red Sox, Yankees, and is not what the holy war it was 20 something years ago. So you have less people probably coming out, expensive tickets, expensive amenities. And now with the pandemic, people aren't really coming back, or there's some restrictions. The New York Yankees, they do have, I'm just using them as an example. They have some debt, now I can access gambling. If I live in New Jersey, I can bet on a game. I don't need to sit at the game. Video games, Black Widow in my home are competing for the dollars and for attention. What's your view on, do you think that in-person attendance decline is correlated to the rise in gambling? Is that a synergistic situation there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, George. And I think one thing I would just say on what, even putting aside sports betting, that I think these big leagues have going for them is the shift from linear television to streaming. Because now what you're seeing is all these streaming platforms need to have that quote unquote killer app to bring people onto their platform, right? Amazon just signed a huge deal for Thursday Night Football. ESPN's doing stuff with the UFC. Live sports still does bring the eyeballs compared to other live television, right? So I think that is kind of the saving grace there.
The red zone was a game changer.
Oh, red zone's
red zone's like that was it was a huge NFL development. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Now you get on YouTube.
Sorry.
I said you have a lot of people cut the cords too. So, but the one thing that I'm always looking for is just the live sports component. Everybody I know around here no longer has any regular the CBS, NBC, ABC channels anymore. I mean, most people I know just have all the digital platforms, and then they use a Sling TV or a YouTube TV or various TV to get the occasional live sports.
Yeah, I'm a YouTube TV guy myself, but bringing it back to sports betting, I think your question, George, around whether they're synergistic, I think it's too early to say if they're related to in-person viewership. I still think like the experience of going to a game. Now, baseball is different because there's probably too many. They probably have to shorten the season, but I still think that's going to have a place, and I think it's separate from sports betting. But when I look at sports betting, and for context, 2018 was when PASPA was repealed, that basically made sports betting legal on a federal level. Until then, it was not. And now you've seen New Jersey's probably been the best state at capitalizing on that since. Many more states are slowly but surely legalizing online sports betting for the main reason that it's such a massive black market that takes place anyway. You might as well regulate it, tax it, and offset some of the budget deficit you have due to COVID. So it's like kind of a no-brainer from that perspective. And it's a lot of similar ways to cannabis, I would say. The only difference being it's legal on a federal level. And then, when I look at like baseball is a great example, George, young people just don't want to watch a full baseball game. They're used to, as we've talked about, they're used to gaming where they're, every second is exciting, not, a baseball game with your grandpa, eating the dog for 3 innings. And I think sports betting, particularly live in-game sports betting, where you can bet, is the next pitch going to be a curve or a fastball? Can really bring back the younger audience. Now I'm saying, of age audience, of course, and this will take time, but, sports betting really is what's going to make the average, game 120 in a baseball season potentially more exciting than it would be otherwise. And I think from that perspective, it's definitely, it's that silver bullet, because we kind of touched on it, like viewership for traditional sports has been declining the past few years, almost across every league. And it's like, how do you bring that back? Well, if I've got $5 on the game, I'm probably a lot more likely to watch than if I have no skin in the game. So I think that's a big part. And I think it's really this generational thing where younger people, Gen Z in particular, they want to feel involved in everything they're doing, right? They want to say to their friends they have, $5 on the game and make it about them, right? It's kind of this social media era that's coming into play. So I think that's kind of why I get excited about it. What we could touch on, but believe it or not, the real money is actually in online casino games. It's just not nearly as sexy to talk about, but that's where these states are going to bring in even more money.
Yeah, you mean like roulette and blackjack and stuff is all? You think that's going to all end up being online for real money, or
Yes,
it already is?
It already is in states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania, online for real money. And what some of these companies are doing is actually doing live dealers, where you can actually stream the dealer. So you kind of don't feel like, if you ever play video poker, you're like, wow, I'm losing every fucking hand. What's going on? Like, is it rigged? So they're
Seems
doing things
dangerous.
like that. No, it's not. I mean, that's where you get into concerns around problem stuff and problem gambling, which is a whole nother topic.
Listen, I love gambling. I love gambling to death, but I just, all I keep hearing is this dark side in the back of my head coming through all this. Poor people just continue to get poorer and poorer and poorer.
Oh man,
quick buck.
Trying to get that hit that huge odd situation and all that.
The baby's formula. There goes the electricity for the month.
And how do you trust that it's honest? I mean, I don't. There's
with
one
sports.
thing,
You mean?
Well, no, with the casino stuff, which was not really what we're talking about in fairness. But I mean, I don't know if I would ever trust a roulette game online for money.
People do, bro. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, you guys are bringing up good points, right? It is potentially a major issue here, and that's kind of the onus is on the individual at the end of the day to kind of make the right choices there, whether we like it or not.
To be somebody there ready to take their money and just profit off of their misfortunes. I know.
So the sports gambling though, are you forced on the ETF side of things? Are you considering the state to state laws that some are? I mean, I don't think DraftKings is even available in California, for example.
Yeah, no. So we don't actually like consider that in the way that we construct the portfolio. Most of the companies are, in whatever state is legal, and California might be on the ballot next year. New York just passed sports betting. It's a matter of time.
How many states have cleared this?
Sorry, how many states?
Yeah, because I know there's 17 states that have cleared marijuana, but it's not a federal. I got it, but it's still 17 individual or 18.
Connecticut just gave the authorization, and a lot of the Native American nations, Mohegan Sun, and there's a Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods are run by the native tribes, and they've gotten the green light to have sports gambling. So it's definitely
no problem with Native Americans taking white people's money.
Totally, they should.
Well, that brings up a whole nother wrinkle in this whole thing is that the tribes in a lot of these states control the gaming, right? The casinos are on their land, and when you move stuff online, how do regulators and legislators think about how that works, right? Are they entitled to it? And that what they're doing is it's state by state issue. It's very different. Like in New York, you have to literally, if you're DraftKings, you have to place your server within one of the casinos, like physically within one of the casinos, and then pay a fee to the casino for access. So there's all this funky stuff. But in terms of our ETF, a lot of the companies are B2C, like DraftKings are the parent company of FanDuel, or PointsBet. You might have heard William Hill. There's actually a fair bit of operators. Some of them are international, and it's a way more mature market in the UK and Australia. Australia, they actually bet like more, I think, more than any other country per capita. They're punters over there. And then there's some companies that are behind the scenes, right? Provide the technology. I mean, it's just the reason I'm excited about that industry in particular is it's this shift from, physical to digital that really kind of makes sense, right? If you're in, Mississippi or Louisiana, where you're going to these regional casinos to place a sports bet or whatever it might be, to move that online just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you ever been to one of those places in Mississippi or Tennessee?
I think I might have gone in college once. I actually just placed a sports bet in Montana, though, where in Montana, it's crazy. They have, I felt like at every gas station in the entire state that I went to, there were these like mini casinos that were all these virtual games, and they did have a sports betting machine. So I was like, I'm here, I got to do it.
Yeah,
I'm surprised Vegas hasn't just taken this whole thing over. I mean, if gambling is legal in Nevada, sports gambling, why can't these places just pop up their servers all over the state? I mean, and how do you? Is it because your internet won't work when you make a sports bet in California? How do they?
It's legislation.
How do they even regulate? I don't understand. Like,
yeah, so it's called the Wire Act, which prevents intra whatever the one where you're from, if a different state, you can't intrastate, you can't do anything interstate in terms of gambling. Like the Wire Act of 1962 or whatever prevents that. Right. And what they use is they have this geolocation technology similar to like if you're on Google Maps or whatever, where it knows where you are, and they basically say, and this is why, like, I forget the exact number, something like 20% of the bets in New Jersey are New Yorkers driving over and placing a bet and then going home.
Well,
that's why New York has no choice but to do it, because everyone's getting all that money's going to flow to Connecticut, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, which it already is. And let's be honest, New York State needs every revenue dollar that it can get. And I can attest to it. Is, I was getting my haircut in Greenwich, Connecticut. If you look on a map, it's right on the border of New York State. So I was getting the haircut in Greenwich, but the geo fencing was picking up New York, Port Chester, which is right across the border. So they wouldn't allow me to place the bet. So FanDuel didn't work in Greenwich. So if you're paying all that money to live in Greenwich, you can't gamble. So guys, you might want to have a little regret about that.
But these UK sites, can you go on there and gamble from California?
Yeah, I mean it's black market then, right? It's offshore. It's not. I mean, you could do it, and like you maybe like Bovada is one that you might recall, or used to be, what was it? I forget what it used to be, but Bovada is a big one, and now you can get your money out in Bitcoin. Like there's some regulatory arbitrage that someone's always trying to figure out. But that's all going to shift. And like I said, the big thing is this is all happening anyway, right? Like this is all, whether it's with a bookie or on Bovada or whatever, and it's just going to shift into the really similar to cannabis when you think about it, right? Like
I think there's so much. There is so many similarities between gaming, legalized gambling, marijuana, and even video games to a certain extent. It's like it's a generational thing. These old laws and these old senior citizens that should be out of office, that, let's be honest, they need the tax revenue. Everyone is smoking dope. You only an idiot would not take the tax money. Only an idiot would not take the revenue from gambling. I mean, but these are the people that, as long as I've been alive, the Cuomo family has been running New York State. I mean, it's time for, I'm going down on a rant over, I know that we're up against the clock here, Will. I know you've got some other commitments. I just really would like to close it out with some questions on the metaverse, and maybe you could just educate the listeners on exactly what that is. And that, I try to explain it to my wife. I said, Roblox is very fascinating to me. Not only does it allow for collaboration and communication, but is it right to say the metaverse is a digital world that kind of straddles the physical world, and it's always happening whether you're there or not. So when I was a kid, and if I played Castlevania, the game only existed when I turned the power button on and was jumping and hitting and chasing Dracula, and the game stopped when I turned it off. Is it right to say that metaverse never turns off? It's always real. It's always existing in real time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good description. And like this concept of the metaverse is like, we're seeing companies that are touching aspects of it. Like Roblox is one. When you look at like Grand Theft Auto Online, that's another kind of ever living, breathing virtual world. Fortnite, even like these games that to certain degrees check some of the different boxes, and they're really not games. They're really kind of virtual worlds that are living and breathing. And it's kind of more of a concept now than reality, but that's exactly it. The thought is, if you've ever read, probably the best thing is if you've ever read Snow Crash, that's a long time ago. Yeah, you got it. So if you ever read Snow Crash, that was actually where the term the metaverse was coined. It was in that book, which is an awesome book if anyone wants to read it and kind of is into sci-fi.
One of the big dogs in cyberpunk.
Yeah, exactly. And we're probably more than that. People are familiar with Ready Player One, right? Like this idea of you've got your physical world, and then you've got the digital world that's to George's point, kind of ever living, breathing, whether you're in it or not, where you have concurrent, there's one iteration of it that everyone's in together and kind of transact, and there's an economy and transacting and kind of the like long-term bull case for it is that like that's going to be a different version of, or the successor to today's what we think of as the internet, right? Instead of the internet being the way we have it now in kind of two dimensions and you're on a certain web page. Instead, let me go in with an avatar and go shopping on the street that has all of the virtual malls or whatever it might be, right? And it's kind of this crazy concept to think about, but we're getting closer to it being realistic from a technology perspective.
But what is terrifying?
Avatar to commit crimes while you're sleeping.
That's a good idea for a movie.
That's how they're doing things you don't want it to do.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely is some bad people out there. And I guess that's what, for kids, they got to be careful about. I know that my daughter has gotten scammed before, which is, someone will make an offer on a trade for like some pet that she has, and they take all her pets and she has no money and she goes running. She's like, I just got scammed. I'm like, dude, I can't help you. You guys got to figure this one out yourself. This is one area of life where you guys are going without.
But in fairness, that can even happen is kind of crazy. I mean, just the other day, our niece was over and she was telling Alexa to play fart noises.
Okay.
And all these different fart noises. This is funny. And she says this specific one, and Alexa says that's part of a premium fart package. No shit. Do you want to learn more about that? And she said yes. And it was like $20. And had I not been sitting there, she could have easily ordered this premium fart package for $20 just by saying it. Like, how does that happen?
Yes, Alexa, I will take the premium fart package.
Who ever thought that would be a career where, someone would sit in a room and get that project greenlighted? And I guess it comes
I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Well, I must have missed it, but what is the name of the sports gambling ETF?
Sure. It's the ticker we got there is BETZ, BETZ. So once again, we're always going for the tickers that are memorable.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, for sure. I mean, why not?
But coming back to this metaverse concept, I don't know how much longer time we have, but two things. One, and I know, Roger, you were talking about music earlier. They're starting to do some pretty amazing things with these concerts inside of these games. So Travis Scott inside of Fortnite, Lil Nas X inside of Roblox, where there's potential to like just talk about one industry this concept of metaverse can disrupt. Like, if I can go on tour inside of a game, reach 100 million people in a concert, like talk about
everybody's paying a ticket for that, right?
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, no, they're not. They're not now.
It may get to the point where you can pop in on your Sony PlayStation and watch George's favorite band, the Foo Fighters.
The Foos.
And it's a step above. Particularly now where we get into VR, which is a whole nother part of the metaverse. But now if I can go to the concert in VR and say, hang out with my friends, now it's like, holy shit, this experience is pretty competitive compared to going to, downtown and sitting in traffic to go to the concert. Right.
And I mean, if you've got headset on and you've built up your sound system in your house to be really amazing, it might actually be a pretty cool experience with you and some friends at home hearing a live concert. But it also is not being at a concert
exactly
at all. So, I mean, it's just as terrifying.
Well, this is why, like, we come full circle on the conversation, like talking about sitting inside all day. And it's like, this is a generational thing in a large extent. And this is about people who have grown up on the internet and grown up with an iPad and are digitally native and are accustomed to having that be a big part. Now, the real world still needs to exist. And that's where shit really happens. But like, they know the digital world is part of where they've spent their lives, whether it's in text chat or video or whatever. And it's kind of scary, particularly if you have kids. I'm sure like that's, the internet's a scary place, but it's just only going to get more in terms of what it's going to mean for people.
And two examples that I've seen where the other entertainment verticals have And I keep going back to Roblox. I know there's probably other games out there. This is the one I know, is that there was this singer called Zara Larson, who I don't know, some younger folks may be familiar with. I didn't really know who she was. She's just a pop singer, but she launched her new song on Roblox, and it was kind of a concert. And my daughters wanted to log in, and there was other people in there. Let's go watch the new song. So the new song doesn't premiere on YouTube or MTV. It's on Roblox. And also this film.
Are they paying a fee to see that?
No, I don't think there was. It's just a way for the artist and the business to get a lot of eyeballs. It's more probably for them, but and then the folks that did In the Heights, Lin-Manuel Miranda's recent film. I think it was a play he made a long time ago and made it into a movie, but as part of the launch for that film was, let's do a performance on Roblox. So they know where these young kids are to get them to come and go see the movie, which I think is pretty interesting. And then the singers also, there's Roblox playlists on Spotify where things are kind of just spinning around in a circle, but they're kind of orbiting around this metaverse, which I don't know, I'm very intrigued by it. And I know I'm an old analog world sentimentalist, but there's just something about what I observe from afar that I think I see it's like the future evolving in front of you, right? That's how I see it.
100%. The concept of buying virtual items, right? Even if it's a fart noise, right? Buying a virtual item. Now that's the sillier example, but like, George, I'm sure your daughters want to buy Robux to buy a new outfit for their character.
I get hit up all the time.
As much as they want a new dress. Right.
But you know what? The cash drain is definitely real. It's not revenge. So that's the other thing, Pete. The money to purchase these things are linked to your bank account. So Roblox is extracting revenue from the.
It seems like a pretty smart way to separate a person from their money.
I got to tell you, I'm very impressed by it. I am very impressed by it.
I mean, it's not like you're going to the mall and getting $5 off your parents to go put quarters in the arcade.
Well, at least there's still
ladies and gentlemen.
At least there's still a backstop where they don't know my password yet. So hopefully they have to at least come to me and beg me with puppy dog's eyes to get the neon dragon pet that they're dying for. I'm like, what happened to your other neon owl or whatever? But Will, I really appreciate your time. I know the other fellows do too. And man, you're always welcome to come back on. And I think we could have gone on for a while, but want to be mindful of your time. If you just want to let the people know where to find you and your company, and if there's anything you want to just mention before we shut it down for the day.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. Thanks for having me. Best place to probably find me is actually on Twitter. My handle's @maybebullish. And probably better than that is just go to our website if you're interested in learning about any of the funds, brownhillinvestments.com. Besides that, once again, thank you guys for having me. I'll see you guys in Roblox or in Fortnite or one of those places. Roger's smiling because he knows he's probably playing it right now.
All right. Well, Pete,
thank you, dude.
Awesome.
Raj will take us out here, but thanks, dude. Good talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks, Pete.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for listening to another edition of $5 Buzz. If you have any questions, ideas, any future guests that we might have, or you have an idea for us, please email us at FIVEDOLLARBUZZ. That's $5 Buzz @gmail.com. And also remember to hit that like or that subscribe button on your YouTube or on your Apple or Spotify. We love you. Thank you. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you.